Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I got a fun little code review for today. I saw this little library that flew through my Twitter feed this past week. This thing called redaxios. It's a 800 byte clone of the Axios API. Axios is like a super popular request library. It makes it easy to make get, post, put, delete, all your favorite HTTP request things easy from the browser. It's big. It's not small, it's big. And the person who made this thing called redaxios, this is Phil by the name of Develop It. You may know him as the person who made Preact, which is a clone of React. He's also obsessed. I'm glad he's self-confessed to this as well. He's obsessed with tiny libraries. The tinier, the better. He will write some really weird code so long as it makes things smaller. I mean, to each their own. But this redaxios library is one that is both small in size, but also small in lines of code to review with you. I really wish I had an intro for code review. It'd be cool to be like, code review, code review, code review. And then you could like know we're getting into it. For now, you can just use that kind of weird, whatever the heck that was. I have no idea. If you've never done a code review with me before, I read the code and I talk about it with you and review it. Yeah, it's simple. Very simple. Code review. Okay, so this is the code. It's supposed to be used just like Axios. I have it cloned down locally so that I can actually like click around easily. It's the source file where all the content is. It's not terribly long. If I actually brought back line numbers, well actually let's go over here. I'm in Zen mode so I can just focus on the code, but if I was actually curious the number of lines, it's 241 lines of code, so nice and small. So let's start doing some code review about how this library is being made, how the donut is being baked, how the sandwich is being, yeah, good jokes, huh? You got your normal little copyright thing up here, and which is, you know, boilerplate stuff. This Develop It works at Google, so I'm sure that this is a thing that he has to do because he works at Google, because Google technically owns this, even because he's working at Google, whatever, lawyers. The thing that's really cool about this library, which is a really good example, is that this is actually a JS file, as you can see here. Let me just make some more space for us. It's a JS file, and you see all these things here. These are JSDoc annotations. And these have been around for, what is this? That was fancy. They have been around for a long time, JSDoc. It's a defined way of documenting JavaScript. And what's really cool about it here is, so what you can, when writing JSDoc code, there's a lot of tooling that you can add on top of it to get value from it. One is you can extract JSDocs and make really easy documentation pages, really cool. Google, back like 10 years ago, like before TypeScript, Flow, Reason, before like all these things, they made this thing called Google Closure Library Compiler that actually was like the first widely used static compiler for JavaScript. Like, you know, TypeScript adds types to JavaScript. Google Closure Compiler, you write some JavaScript code. I mean, I can use an example here. This is a great example. Where's an easy example? Here, you write some JavaScript code, you add some JSDoc annotations, and the Closure Compiler will use those JSDoc annotations to type check your code way back when. It was written in Java. It was really clunky to use. It hasn't really gained that much popularity outside Google, but it was the first of its kind. But what's cool here is that that idea is kind of kept true, because if you look in the actual root of this folder, you see a tsconfig. Little known fact, you can actually use TypeScript with JavaScript and type check it with JSDoc annotations. And that's what you see right here. This tsconfig is how you configure TypeScript. And these two lines is saying to the TypeScript compiler, allow JavaScript, like, you know, read JavaScript files, then also check JavaScript files. And it does that with these JSDoc annotations. And these are some of the most rich JSDoc annotations I've ever seen. Previous job, I'd have to write them a lot. It's its own little syntax, just like TypeScript is, but it seems like it's getting more consistent with TypeScript, where you can see like there's this property here, but all this stuff is just annotations, but this is still a JavaScript file, which is like the really cool part of this. Like this will type check correctly and compile, and you'll get types for it for free. So this is like really cool. Like if you have an interest in writing JavaScript, you want to do some type checking, you can use TypeScript for it. It's a little known thing, probably good for its own video, probably. Not this one, I'm talking about code review. But this is a lot of, this is, it's defining a type called options, which is an object. This options object has all these properties. It has a property called URL, method, default is get, headers. These are all the actual property values. These are the types for it. These are in brackets because they're keys on the options object. Headers is another type definition. It's a type which is just an object where the keys are strings, the values are strings. Here it's making a generic. Template is a generic. Different languages call generics and templates different things. It's a way for you to, not have to be so verbose with the types that you use. This template is being used here. So the shape of the response from the API request, type def. So he's making a lot of type definitions that he can reuse elsewhere. So like if you were in TypeScript, if you are a TypeScript person, this is literally the same thing as, I'm not going to type this one because this one's scary. Let's type this one. So like this T. So interface response T is the same thing as status number, right? Status number. And then here you have data T, right? Right here, data is T. These things are the same thing. This is just JavaScript and this is TypeScript. Really, really, really cool. Let's keep going using ES modules because that's the future today. Get on the train if you want to not be delayed. Weird. So this is the fun part of whenever I read Develop Its code because he's so fancy with things and so clever with things. You have here as being an export default a function called create, which is itself being wrapped in a parentheses. If you scroll to the bottom here, you can see that it's being self-invoked. So essentially, when you import this module, this function is going to invoke itself. And eventually this function called create is going to be invoked. And when it's invoked, it's going to return this redaxios object, which is what's going to be exported from the module itself. So when we're reading this code, this redaxios object, which is, I don't know where it's coming from. I don't even know where is this coming from? Redaxios. I don't know where that actually thing's coming from. That's a great question. I'm not going to worry about it for now, because that's definitely a rabbit hole. If I really got myself into a little fun thing with it. Redaxios, where is this coming from? Where is that actually? Oh, sorry. I'm silly. So yeah, redaxios is here. The function of redaxios is defined here. This is using the fun of function hoisting, because JavaScript's weird, where any functions defined as a function declaration, like this. So this is a function declaration, not like this. This is a function expression. I think I have a video about this if you are curious about the difference. This is not hoisted, this is hoisted, which means that when you're writing this code here, it's actually in scope because when the JavaScript interpreter runs this function, this is being hoisted to the top. So it's effectively being defined at the top of this scope. Fun JavaScript, but it means that it's accessible. So you can create a new instance with defaults. Here's types that were defined up here. It's so cool that, JSDoc works with TypeScript, and now I can still use IntelliSense to navigate. And actually I have all these things here just through JSDoc. That is really cool. I should do that more often. Here, defining the public methods on redaxios to keep the same API. What are these annotations? This is so weird. Does anybody have any idea? This is so strange. Are these like GitHub usernames or something? That is weird. They gotta be GitHub usernames. If I went to like GitHub, yeah, that is weird. Okay. I guess that's what happens when Microsoft owns VS Code and GitHub. You get these weird integrations. Weird. But here it's trying to replicate the Axios API. So get, delete, making some anonymous functions being passed to redaxios. These things are pretty straightforward, I would imagine. Get, passing the URL, config, it's being passed to the redaxios. That's cool. Nothing really fancy there. Here's a fun little utility function to spread things on where, you give a function and you want to, how's this being used? I don't even know. Oh, so spread, if you're not using ES6, you want to have it built in. And then because he's developed it, he's like, here's how you can make it smaller. I don't know why he's not using that, just because it's harder to read. This is cool, a fun little utility function. This is a fun little exercise that you yourself would probably be well served to try out at one point. Do a deep merge. So like, it's better to see the examples because then you kind of get an idea of like how it's being used. So like here's defaults. So like, deep merge, like my default is name Harry, right? Like these are the default values, like hungry, true, and then you can deep merge, and then of course it does deep merge, right? So it's recursive. So like stats, numbers 3, right? So it's deep. And then here you can actually pass in a config that says name Barry. So when it actually evaluates this, the object back is going to be Barry because it's going to merge it on top of it. It's a utility method. Underscore has it, Lodash has it. You have to write it yourself because there's no way to do a deep merge in JavaScript natively, so you kind of write it yourself. This one's funny. I was looking at this beforehand because it has utilities specific to this library. So for example, this lowercase function is funny because it's being used when you're making the headers of a request. I always find that tests are a good way to understand things when I'm trying to give examples. So like options headers. So where's Axios? Axios headers. So this whole thing here is if you pass in headers that are capitalized, it'll actually then lowercase it for you and do a merge, which is a very like library specific thing. You will not find this in utility deep merge functions because there's no need, but because this is specific, that's why you're getting it. Here's the object that you'll make when you actually return it. It's checking if the options is an array. So if it's an array, like 1, 2, 3, then it's going to say concat the overrides. So you're merging it, you're not overriding it. So if overrides is, 4, 5, 6, then what's actually being returned is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because you're merging it, and concat returns the result of that concatenation. So that's cool whenever it's an array. Here we're checking in options. We're getting the keys for lowercasing it. We're gonna overwrite the keys. So like, where's an example here, right? So here's some keys. It's just gonna overwrite them there. And then here's where we actually do some overrides here. So we're getting the overrides. This is cool. This is how you cast with JSDoc. This is included in the casting. You actually have to do the parentheses to reference what you're casting. It's a weird JSDoc thing. But here you're getting the key, right? So if the overrides object, always find examples are easier. If overrides is, I don't know, banana foo, then I is going to be banana. And you're saying I is going to be to lowercase. So if it was B, it would be lowercase banana. There's the key. Getting the value. So you're doing, looking up the value here to get the value, which is going to be foo. And then here it's kind of saying that, what is this saying? Key in out. So does the key already exist in the produced value? Is it an object? Yes, then do a deep merge, which is you want to merge things together. So like if in out, nope. If out looks like foo this, right, then it's going to say, okay, I need to like merge that value into here, and then it essentially recurses on itself, so it can then do the same logic inside of that. So a recursive deep merge is what it is. If it's not an object, if it's just a string, then it's just going to assign that to the key and then return it. So fun little deep merge thing. Really, really neat. Not too much magic in here, thankfully. And here's the meat of the entire object, redaxios, where you issue a request. The default behavior of redaxios, let's see if there's an example in here. I always find that easier. You can put a string as the URL that you want to request, but you can also URL, come on, buddy, where's my example? So you can do this, but you can also do, so this is one way of making a request like that. Let's bring it over here. I always like having examples. I always find it to be much easier to understand. So, whoa, that was crazy. So you can do it this way, or you can do it, And if you use axios, you'll know this is true. So you can do it this way as well. And what this is saying right here is if the first argument, URL, is not a string, so if it's an object, then the second argument, so we're going to say that URL is an object, so that's actually the config. So this object is actually the config. And then we're going to take the URL off of that config object and put it there. So this is some nice little quick sanitization up front to make sure that, you know, there's flexibility in how you can actually use this function, which is nice. Here's the response. Great. Deep merge of the config with the default values when you actually make the Axios instance. Custom headers. Here we're getting some data. You can transform a request. So this is an array. What does it say? An array of transformations to apply the outgoing request, where each f is a function, so you're being given the data or data options. What's neat about this right here is that f is desired to return an object to reassign to data, but in case it doesn't return anything, if you're just like, you know, imperatively saying, like, if f is just, you know, data, we just do data.foo equals lol, the implicit return here is undefined, right? So here it's making sure that there's still going to be data by actually having data still be assigned to data. So you could also return, you know, this if you wanted to, but this is just a nice little safety precaution right here. So nice and clever. This is a nice utility from Axios where if the data that you're giving is an object, and this is kind of funny, I believe what this is saying is it's checking if the data is not an array. I'm a little confused why this is being used for a array check when up above it's doing array.isArray. Maybe this code is written at different times. It seems a little bit weird to me. It's a curious thing, probably a pull request to actually fix that up. But here it's, you know, stringifying the data if you're making a JSON request and setting the content type to application JSON. This regexes always make my eyes cross-eyed, but if you're using CSRF, you can add that in there to have it be applied. Some other options to apply the correct headers. Base URL. This made me laugh because this is how you easily coerce the value here to a string, which is what you want the URL to be. Bitwise operators, man, these always get me. Like, URL is a string, so we'll do URL equals URL question, right? So if I do, I'll have to go into Node. Yes. So URL equals URL question, and then we can say URL index of question mark. So index of gives you the index, and then when you use this is a bitwise operator, and this is falsy, I think, or it's truthy. I don't know. If I do this, what is this again? So that's 0. So 0 is falsy, right? So 0 is falsy, but an actual integer is truthy. So this is essentially coercing this value to say true or false. So like, does a question mark exist in the URL itself? Like, is my URL like, you know, well, what I have up here, right? Then I want to use an ampersand as the divider when I'm actually making the query parameters. Otherwise, we use a question mark. So that's a fun little thing right there. And then you can define your own fetch function, or you can use the built-in browser one. Man, this is a long video. Are you still with me? Blah, blah, blah. Long video. Then here's just the meat of it. Actually making the fetch, passing in all the options here. Has some transforms on the then. Nothing too wild here. Validate status, res okay. And here you can say what the response type is of the response, or it'll default to text. And this gets me a little bit confused. This JSON parse, it'll be caught and parsed with object.new the error, or just return the response itself. And this is nice. This is a cancel token. It's checking if this actually exists before it tries to use it. Defaults and create. And then you just use it. And then you can actually kind of read the test here to kind of get an idea of like how all different ways that you'd expect it to be used. And then what's really cool is that if you want to build it, you do npm run build according to the package JSON, and actually have it build the production value. And there you have 800 bytes. And then here you have this, the actual created JS file, but then also the types, because you're using JSDocs. That is a mind bender. Yeah, but that is redaxios code reviewed. Hopefully you enjoyed that little video. I didn't realize it was going to take 20 minutes long, but hopefully you enjoyed that. I'm curious if that kept your attention. I feel like any library bigger than 800 bytes is going to be 40 minutes long, so I'll have to be a little bit more picky with what I actually read about in the code. Neat little library, very clever, really fun. I enjoyed that. Hopefully you did too, and I'll catch you in the next video. Till then, keep coding.